Have you ever been frustrated with the religious broadcasting on social media and the World Wide Web? I have. If you are looking for a viable alternative to that, welcome to the Higher Grounds Podcast. Welcome to the Higher Grounds Podcast. We certainly are glad that you have joined us today. This is the first episode of the Higher Grounds Podcast. We have been advertising for several months regarding the fact that we are starting this medium for church people, pastors, and other interested parties regarding several things that we'll be discussing, not just biblical and not just church related, but social as well as political, and how Christians are to respond to those things in the society in which we live in. Again, I'm Andy Wells. I pastor the Galilee Baptist Church in Monroe, North Carolina. I'm in my 18th year here. God blessed us many years ago to come to this great church and to pastor it for the glory of God. God has blessed each of us in our ministries and in our friendships together, and we have been able to do a lot of co-ministering together in different projects that we work on throughout the year. And God laid upon our heart several months ago to start the Higher Grounds Podcast to be a benefit and a blessing and a viable alternative to a lot of the less than desirable content that's on social media and on the web. Not just secular content, but even some religious content has some very shady aspects to it, and a lot of it isn't even biblical. And so what we want to do is give the Lord the preeminence in all that we do, but share some practical, general content with you from the Scriptures, doctrinal issues and things of that nature that'll be a blessing and a help to pastors and lay people alike. Again, this is Andy Wells, and Michael Poindexter is to my right, StephenAldrich is to my left. These are two men that I work with very closely in the ministry, and the Lord's allowed us to develop a great bond and a great friendship, and I'm so thankful that they have decided to aid and assist us in this fine project for the Lord's glory and honor. Brother Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, what God's doing in your life and ministry, and some of the things that we do together.
I am StephenAldrich, pastor of Lighthouse Baptist Church in Pageland, South Carolina. Honored to be the pastor there. And I've been pastoring there for about 12 years now. And it's hard to believe, but that's how ministry is. It just kind of flies by, and I've been there for 12 years. The Lord has blessed me in marriage. I married my high school sweetheart, Crystal. And the Lord has given us three beautiful children, Lydia, Seth, and Haven. And the Lord's just been good in my life. I got saved at the age of 14. I grew up in a pastor's home. I grew up around the ministry. And really never thought about, preacher, and never wanted those kinds of things until I got saved. And then when God saved me, I knew God wanted me to be a preacher. And so I began preaching at the age of 14. God just blessed my life, been good to me, far better than I deserve. And now having the privilege to pastor Lighthouse and be a part of youth camps. I got saved at a youth camp. My wife got saved at youth camp. And God just changed her life. And so not only in getting to pastor, but it really is just icing on the cake to get to be involved in youth camp and youth work. Light on the Mountain Youth Camp, Galilee Baptist Camp here, and also at RBT Revival Camp. So Lord's just blessed my life, and can't believe where I'm at now. Nothing without Him, I understand that. But God's been good to me, and it is a privilege to get to labor with these men, whether we're preaching together or working on a project or in camp. God just blessed my life, and I'm glad to be doing it. And I want to wish you a happy new year, and looking forward to some ministry opportunities and helps that this podcast will bring. So hope you'll enjoy it.
Brother Stephen's a great preacher. I think Brother Michael would agree with that. But we have preached together and for one another for several years. Yeah. I've known you probably 18 years, close to 18 years since I've been here. And the blessings of the Lord in Brother Stephen's life. He's probably the greatest right now, in my opinion, one of the greatest young preachers that I know in regard to content and spirit. And we kid a lot because he's so positive and upbeat. And he says he's right.
I'm chocolate milk, and this is buttermilk.
I'm butter, but
tell it.
Well, I told him. I said you can't. You can't make biscuits with chocolate milk, praise God. Amen. But I love Brother Stephen, and I love his family, and they're serving the Lord. We do youth camps together, and we're thankful for that. Brother Poindexter, introduce yourself and tell about what God's doing at Lighthouse Baptist Church, North Campus.
Well, thank you, Brother Wells, for the opportunity to be part of this new ministry, and I'm excited about that.
Yes.
My name is Michael Poindexter, and I do have the privilege of pastoring the Lighthouse Baptist Church in Seagrove, North Carolina. Been there, we just closed our 13th year, and so we're excited about the future there. The Lord has given me that privilege, and I pastor, in my opinion, some of the finest people alive and serving God today.
No doubt. No doubt.
I appreciate the sacrifice that goes into the ministry there. And we all realize one thing about ministry, that it's not just about the man behind the pulpit. It takes a unified effort to accomplish anything for the Lord. And just a little bit of my backstory. Grew up in the Baptist church pretty much most of my life. I've heard the gospel, only the Lord knows how many times. Seed planted when I was a young man, watered multiple times. But at the age of 21 years old, I found myself empty on the inside. I had a head knowledge of the gospel, but never had a transaction of faith.
Right.
And on September the 6th of 1998 was the day I found myself sitting in a little Baptist church. And the preacher that morning preached the gospel again. I heard it, and this time it was different. I got under conviction.
Amen.
And I put my trust and faith in the Lord and was gloriously saved that day.
Amen.
It was a transaction that day that has changed not only my eternity, but even probably my family tree. I was privileged to marry my high school sweetheart, just like Brother Stephen, Miss Ricky Beth, and she has been an asset to us in the ministry.
No doubt.
And loves us, is willing to go wherever God sends us to. And the Lord has blessed our family with 5 beautiful children who we absolutely adore. And we've enjoyed the challenge and the blessing of raising them thus far. Looking forward to the future of what God may have in store for their lives. And just at this season of my life in ministry, I'm excited about an opportunity to be a soldier.
Amen.
And a servant.
Amen.
And that God has placed me with men like this who love people and love the Lord and love lost souls. And just anything we can do to make a difference for the gospel's sake interests us highly. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of the Higher Grounds podcast.
Well, this is going to be a long relationship as we try to aid and assist young men, particularly young preachers, in the ministry that God has called them to. And I'm thankful for that. I have been married to my high school sweetheart, Miss Beverly. She and I have been married since 1985. God has blessed us with 5 wonderful children, Victoria, Christopher, Sarah, Caleb, and Aaron. And they're serving the Lord. They're all right here at Galilee Baptist Church serving the Lord with us. And I have 6 grandchildren, and just a joy. It's a joy and a privilege to see this thing begin to come full circle, for me. And the fact that they're serving the Lord is just it's just a fantastic honor that the Lord's allowed us to have. And I give the credit really ultimately to the Lord, but
yes, sir.
My wife has done a great job of being a mother and a mentor to my children. I have spent a lot of my ministry on the road, traveling, and preaching to people all across the country and ministering to other people's children as well as my own. But my wife has been that bedrock at home.
Amen.
That was the blessing of
Absolutely.
my children coming to know Christ and develop a servant's heart within them. And I'm thankful to her for that. I really am. But I was in the financial services business. I worked for a subsidiary of Ford Motor Company in my secular working days. Back in the 80s, and it was in the 80s up into the 90s where God got a hold of my heart in a motel room. I got right with God.
Amen.
And started serving the Lord. And it wasn't long before God called us to preach. We pastored the first church in 1991. That was the Calvary Baptist Church in Columbia, Tennessee. Moved from there to Newport, Tennessee, and was the associate pastor there at the Calvary Baptist Tabernacle, where my dad was the pastor for 40 years, Dr. Larry Wells. And then in 2001 came to Galilee Baptist Church. Hard to believe that we've been here this long, but God has richly blessed, and
Amen.
I'm extremely thankful for that.
Yes,
I really am.
Absolutely.
Hey, Brother Mike, tell the folks some of the things that we do together, some of the conferences and things that we work together and we orchestrate together to help folks. Some folks may want to register to come to some of those things in 2019.
Absolutely, yeah. We have, it seems like we have been on a course to spend our summers together, especially
right.
in youth camps, whether it be here at Galilee or Brother Steve, so active there at Light on the Mountain, and then now even spending some times at some other camps like the Smoky Mountain Youth Revival there at Brother Jeff Ledbetter's. And of course, our young people have been here at Galilee now for probably about 7 or 8 years. And one of the highlights of our summers, our kids get to come here and they hear just solid preaching, and the activities are geared around good fellowship. And then on top of that, more than anything, just trying to get to know these kids and invest in their lives. And so there's that camp is always available. You can actually register during the leading up to the summer months here at the Galilee Baptist Church website, and that's always an exciting time. We also last year launched the basically the couples retreat, the Forever Us conference, and we have that there in the Gatlinburg, Tennessee area. And it's coming up again. As a matter of fact, I believe on the docket, it's I believe March. I believe is the time of the year, or May.
It's April. It's April. The week of April the 20th, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right.
And the reason I remember that is because it's my anniversary.
Okay,
congratulations.
Yes, absolutely.
I guess.
And but we started holding that there, and if you're interested in possibly registering and coming to that conference, we've already got the venue locked down again.
Yes, we do.
And we're excited about that. And you can get in touch with either of us pastors. We can give you the dates and the way to go about registering for that conference. And then of course there's always just different meetings, from jubilees to Bible conferences that we all put on locally at our churches and try to help support each other's meetings there. And there's a lot happening, and the time seems to be drawing nigh, whether it be just our season of ministry ending or the Lord coming back. And we want to absolutely exhaust our resources in doing all we can to be an asset to the church.
Absolutely. And
definitely reach out and win as many people to Christ as possible.
Hey, Brother Stephen, tell about the what we started last year with the Pastors Kids Camp. I think that was probably one of the greatest things that we've done together.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a pastor's home, and so knowing the nuts and bolts of ministry, when I began pastoring, I already had a good idea about some requirements, but been on my heart for several years to have a camp, and we do youth camps for all different kinds of things. And but we take about 3.5 days, 2.5 days, according to how schedule falls. Matter of fact, it's on the dock again this year, and we call it the Hold the Line Conference. And a lot of times in the church, you've got the pastor, and he is out, and he's taken the blunt of many attacks, and he's laboring, he's working. Well, right behind him, behind every good man, is a great woman. And so, and we're all blessed to have wives who love the ministry and help our ministry.
Right.
And so so you have those lines, and then we call what we call the invisible line, and that's the one that doesn't often get thought about, and that's our pastors' kids. And so Lighthouse Baptist Church, our church I pastor, and then also these churches as well, gave us the privilege of saying bring them in, and so we bring pastors' kids in. Really didn't set an age in our beginning stages. We had about 40 young people last year, and just brought them in and let them have a few days to just be a kid and enjoy each other and fellowship without having the pressure of people watching them all the time. And nothing in the world is greater than being involved in ministry. I love it, and we want that to get into the hearts of our young people, our kids. But at the same time, it does them well, just like it does us, to be able to take some time away and fellowship one with another. And we had a great time. Brother Jeff Brown did some preaching, and Lord willing, he'll be back again this year, and different men of God. And so we do want you to make that a matter of prayer. And then also, we'd love to have any preachers' kids, pastors' kids to be able to come. And we'll hold that in the spring, getting a few more details worked out. But it was a privilege to do that. I really wish I'd have had that, and to be able to get away. And one thing that we do not do, it's not a get together, let's talk about how bad it is. We want to bring them together and encourage them. Yeah. The best years of my life has been in ministry and serving God, and I want to try to help encourage them that way. And so that's a privilege. And matter of fact, I appreciate all those who helped us put that together, and looking forward to it again this year.
Amen.
It's a lesson.
We also have another conference that is really, I think the Lord's going to take it and use it in a great way. Well, Michael, talk about the Next Steps Conference.
Absolutely, yeah. I had failed to mention that as well as one other I'll mention momentarily. But the Next Steps Conference is something we started also about 2 years ago, and we gear that toward the college and career age young folks that are kind of turning the page to another chapter in their life. They've kind of aged out of youth camp, and they're on to the next stage of either considering marriage or college and career, but they're still trying to serve God and find their way around. And what we found is that a lot of times those young people find themselves getting a little more disconnected because they're not so intimately a part of that youth group.
Yep.
And so we started the Next Steps Conference here at Galilee, and we held it one time a year, and it's right before college, gets back in, so that if they're finishing up their season of work there in the summertime, that they can come down. We spend a few days, we invest in their lives, we make sure that we have a few services where we have, we preach the Word of God to them and encourage their heart there. But what we're finding them most encouraged about is the breakaway sessions, where we just get down to dealing with the issues that they're, or the stage of life that they're in. And that's always in August. We try to hold that, we always try to look at the calendar and find out about the week before or 2 weeks out from college getting back in, so that we don't interfere with their school schedule. Yep. And so that's always something else too you can look forward to. Before we move past that, Brother Wales, let me also mention we have been for a few years now holding satellite forums. For pastors, to where, if you're as a pastor, if you'd like to hold a forum in your area, we want to get together with you, and we want to meet more men of God and try to be an encouragement. And what those forums are designed for is, ministry in life is so busy that a lot of times it's hard for us to really sit down and find out what other guys are facing, what other guys are going through, ideas they have. We may sit down and talk about missions. We may talk about music ministry or youth programs, Sunday school, problems in the church. And we just throw those ideas on the table there, and we glean from each other. We are a strong proponent of iron sharpening iron here.
Absolutely.
We believe that we grow from each other.
Absolutely.
And so that's another one that we've really enjoyed. Men have gotten encouraged in their hearts. And it's been a great part of my life in the last couple of years. And again, we do that on a satellite basis. So if you're interested in that, you can contact Brother Wales, Brother Aldridge, or myself, and we'll set a date, put it together, and we'd love to meet some of your friends that we may not know. And because we're looking to try to broaden our scope of men that we pray for and that we encourage in the ministry. So we're thankful for that ministry.
One thing I love about those meetings, and they have been great, is the fact that, we've had some meetings where there were 7 or 8 guys.
Yes.
And they may know each other, or you may have a meeting like at your place, there's about 30 pastors. Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of guys just getting to know each other. But it doesn't matter where you're pastoring at, every pastor's dealing with issues and problems.
That's right.
And I don't know about y'all, but I'd much rather, if I'm in a fight, I'd rather have more on my side than against me. And so that's one great thing about that. And then it's, blossom friendships. And, sometimes pastors, we can be some weird creatures.
Yeah, that's a
good way to put it. And the way we deal with things. Yes. But you bring that together and find out, everybody's dealing with some of the same stuff. We're on the same side, we're on the same heaven, trying to reach people. And I want to help somebody contend in the last days. But then I'm blessed to have men who try to help.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So those are great things. every preacher can learn.
Oh, yes.
Regardless of age or how long in ministry. Mary, one of the things that I do here at the church, I learned out of the forums, the pastors' forum. And I learned it as a result of a young 20-something-year-old preacher and what he was doing in his ministry at his church with his men. And when he began to talk about it, mention it, I said, that'll work at our place. And so we engage. I'm constantly wanting to learn. It's a privilege and a blessing to be able to learn. People have asked, why this podcast? Why the Higher Grounds podcast? Well, I want to make a statement to you about that. Several months back, I was on social media. I think it was on YouTube actually, and I was watching some of the content that was being produced by some Baptist folks and put out there. Some of it was just heretical. It wasn't even biblical. Others were putting out things that I agreed with as far as their stand on it, but not their stance. They were very vile and very vulgar in their stand against what they saw as sin in the Scripture, which is sin, but they were vulgar and their spirit was definitely not Christ-like. And I was angered by that, not with a fleshly anger, but with a righteous indignation of, why do we try to use pride in our stand against what's wrong, and ultimately we're wrong in our stand. And so the Lord began to really deal with my heart and said, well, start a viable alternative to that. Do something different. So that's why we're starting now with the Higher Grounds podcast. And I believe it will do a great work for the glory and honor of God. I really do. And the Lord impressed upon my heart that great hymn of the faith, Higher Ground. And listen to the words to that hymn, the Higher Ground. Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I don't have it all memorized, but listen to this. I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. It's a prayer. In verse number 2, my heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay. Though some may dwell where these abound, my prayer, my aim, it's higher ground.
Yeah.
And then verse number 3, I want to live above the world. Mm-hmm. I like that. I want to live above the world, though Satan's darts at me are hurled, for faith has caught the joyful sound, the song of saints on higher ground. The final verse, verse 4, I want to scale the utmost height and catch a gleam of glory bright, but still I'll pray till heaven I found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. And in the chorus, of course, everyone knows it. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. And as I was looking over those verses, and they were touching my heart, I thought about, how that those verses really are applicable to what we're trying to convey from the Higher Grounds podcast. And it would be this. Verse 1 talks about the struggle that he has to get to where he wants to be. And we want to help folks who are saved, serving the Lord, but just struggling with with just every day, that path, that walk down the narrow way. We want to give them some practical direction in how to make that struggle be a success. And then verse number 2 just deals with, the submitted life, being submitted to God. And everybody thinks of submission as being, some weird, strange word or weird, strange doctrine. But as we submit ourselves to God and His lordship in our life and His supremacy in our life, as He is preeminent in our life, that submission helps us to become and be what God would have us to be. Verse 3 talks about a standard of sanctification in the life of the believer, where he said, I want to live above the world. Mm-hmm. And, one older preacher talked about how that the world has crept in the church and the church has become worldly. All of those things, we know all the cliches about that. But there is a truth, and I think everybody would have to admit it, regardless of which side of the coin you're on. The church is not what she used to be. Right. She isn't what she used to be. Because there was a time when sanctification was magnified because God magnified it, Absolutely. Right? God magnified sanctification, and we want to help folks to develop a standard in their life of setting themselves apart for the glory of God. Verse 4 talks about this songwriter being able to see the splendor of God.
Absolutely.
And boy, I want to do, if nothing else, I want to teach folks through the podcast how to get a glimpse of the splendor of a sovereign God and how that He can just be very real in their own personal life.
Absolutely.
He's a real God. It's not a religion. This is a relationship with a very real God. And then that chorus really tells us the source of it all, and that is making much out of Christ. Sirs, we would see Jesus Christ. I don't think you can get any better than that.
Absolutely.
The quote of the week. What's the quote of the week?
Quote of the week goes right along with everything you've just said. One of my heroes, Pastor John Melton, pastor of Tabernacle Baptist Church, still is for over 40 years, made this statement. He said, you can either kick the darkness or you can shine some light in it. And it may be a bad world and things may be turned upside down. By the grace of God, we want to shine some light.
Absolutely. Well, you've got to tell us this. This is the Higher Grounds podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And you know that there is we are coffee connoisseurs here.
Connoisseurs.
So that's exactly.
Professionals.
Absolutely.
Today's
what is the coffee of the week?
Coffee of the week is a Starbucks 2018 Christmas blend.
Yes.
And it includes an aged Sumatra. and it makes for a very good cup of coffee.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. And, I know some of you aren't coffee drinkers and you're not Starbucks drinkers or whatever it is that you may or may not be.
Yeah.
I can't drink the tea with my pinky out,
Can't do
so
that.
I got to have it black and strong, praise God. Got to have it black and strong.
Yes, sir.
That is the coffee of the week. And let me say this. Until next week, from here at the Higher Grounds podcast, you keep pressing on the upward way. We'll see you next week.